Hello all. Today we will look into request for architecture work. So for example, there is a company and that is looking for an architectural change. Change can be like they want a whole new set of architecture, or they want to modify their architecture, or they want to extend their architecture. So whatever it might be, if they are looking for any architecture work, then that will be the organization which is looking for the change is the sponsor organization, and this sponsor organization will pass on the request to architectural organization. This organization will be responsible to create this architecture work, whatever is requested. Okay, so this is passed from sponsor organization to architectural organization. And what are the origins of this work? So it can be initial, where the in the preliminary phase of ADM, this architecture work can be started. That is a main place where it starts actually. And then if there are any change requests, then the request for architecture work can be uh, changed accordingly. And while migration planning, if there are any misses in the initial preliminary phase, then those changes can be accommodated in the request for architecture work. Okay, so that's about request for architecture work, and it's part of preliminary phase. Since ADM is iterative, if there are any misses, we can identify that in migration planning, and then again when the iteration comes, we can include it in the request for architecture work. And in the same way, if there are any changes that is coming from sponsor, then those can be again uh, uh, put into the request for architecture work. What does this architecture work document, request for architecture work document contains? It contains, as usual, any document, it will have a summary. So that summary is a brief thing of what architecture the sponsor is looking for, and then sponsor details like name, their organization name, and then what are the contacts, whom should this architectural organization be contacting to if, in case they need any information or any help to understand their need. And then business imperative. In business imperative, we will be looking into what is the strategy. It has to be filled up with the strategy, goals, mission, and what is their vision. If you know all this, then it will be more easy to understand how the organization is going to operate and how the architecture that is being developed will be helpful. And then if there are any constraints, those constraints has to be mentioned. Mm, Constraints can be like budget related constraints. If they have fund of certain amount, then those should be mentioned. And if they are going to release those fund in a yearly fashion or monthly fashion, then that those constraints has to be mentioned here. All the related to finance and everything can be mentioned in the budget. And if there are any organizational related constraints, any organization you take, there can be multiple BUs, business units. So if how they operate will be different. So is there any differences in their business units, and if there are any operational related differences, so those can be mentioned in the organizational constraints. And then any external constraints like regulatory or their customers who they are dealing with. So if there are any such kind of constraints, those can be mentioned in the constraints as well, external constraints as well. And then additional information about the sponsor, like what kind of work they do in. So to say what is an industry type, and is there any historic work they did other than this, any previous work they did other than what they are doing currently, and what is their current architecture, what is their architecture capabilities. When I say architecture capabilities, uh, whether they have a board of architecture or any solution architects, so those skills, do they have those skills, those things will come into architecture capability. And then if there are any links, documents, documentation, if there is anything related to this organization, then those all things can be part of this one. And then comes the last but not the least, the success criteria. So how is the sponsor organization is going to see the success of this architecture work project. So it can be short term, it can be milestone based, or it can be long term. So whatever criteria they are looking into, that should be mentioned in the success criteria. So that's about the architecture work in brief. If you like this video, please share, like, and subscribe. Thank you.